Thank you. So welcome everybody to the Town Board meeting of Tuesday, April 24th, 2018. And start off with some announcements. The Rotary Annual Pancake Breakfast is this Saturday, April 28th, 8 to 1 p.m. And that's at St. Mary's Church on South Greeley Avenue. $10 for adults, $5 for kids. Proceeds of the event go to the Rotary Club, service above self. The Friends of Chappaqua Public Library Annual Used Book Sale. The donation days are April 30th and May 1st. The sale days are May 2nd to May 6th. On May 3rd, a whole bunch of groups, Sustainability Advisory Board, Greeley Stop, Chappaqua Central School District, the Arts and Culture, and the Friends of Chappaqua Performing Arts. They're showing Before the Flood. That's May 3rd, 7 p.m. at Chappaqua Performing Arts Center. The Farmers Market, May 12th, is the first day for the outdoor season. May 29th, the day after Memorial Day, is Thank a Volunteer First Responder Day. And we have our Girl Scouts make cookies for our volunteers, and they bring it to their different firehouses or the ambulance corps. Art Around Town is May 31st from 5 to 8:30 p.m. And that's it for the announcements. Actually, we had a fishing derby. I just saw that today. That's coming up, I think, not the 29th, yeah, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, and that's at Gedney Park. So that's it. As far as my supervisory report, I'll try to be quick. Last week, we voted to recommend Rob Fleisch to be appointed to Westchester County Airport Advisory Board, and Lisa suggested that we also create an Airport Advisory Committee. So we have that on our agenda tonight to do so. We will then solicit, advertise it and try to get people interested to join. And then once we get some people interested to join, we will either have interviews or just appoint them. And but right now we're just setting up the committee. Let's see what else. We talked about in our work session the chap line, and we talked about forming another committee. But the goal is just to study these issues. We do have a lot of committees, but we have people who are willing to work and volunteer their time. So, and the chap line is something that we're just going to explore, and we're going to try to form a committee with all interested parties, those in favor, those against, and see if we can make it work where everybody's interests are satisfied to the extent possible, and see if it's even feasible from a price and environmental point of view. But it's just studying it. It's something that's, at least I think everybody agrees, is worth studying. As far as the downtown Chappaqua infrastructure project, some of this is somewhat old news, but I haven't said it in a public town board meeting, so I'll just say it. We've installed the largest and most critical part of the sewer system. That's by Starbucks and down Lower King Street. The new lines were installed pursuant to our engineering plans, but we wanted to verify the connection to the county trunk line was correct. We did stop work on Lower King while we waited for written confirmation. We weren't idle during that time. We did work behind Pizza Station. We did some stormwater work from April 2nd to April 13th. And that work was completed, and now we are back on Lower King Street because we got the written confirmation we needed. Work resumed on Lower King Street last week. It's continuing this week, and our goal right now is to pave on Friday. And when we pave Lower King, we will also be smoothing out Greeley. We're also going to be bringing the street sweeper on Friday before the paving begins, and we hope that's going to be done on Friday. We were hoping to do it on Wednesday, but it's going to be raining tomorrow. So it will be done on Friday. It will be done during the day. We will have traffic open on Lower King Street. They will be paving half a street at a time. So, and then we will be doing some lines as well for parking. Earth Day was this past Sunday. I wanted to take the opportunity to thank our incredible Sustainability Advisory Board for all the work they've done, to name a few of their projects. The Paris Accord, that we're following that here in Newcastle, the reusable bag initiative, which now New York State is looking to pass the reusable bag initiative. Solarize, we have a lot of people who have solar panel now, thanks to them. Community choice aggregation, over 80% of Newcastle residents and businesses are using green power for their electricity. We're going to be introducing a composting program soon. Thanks to Sustainability Advisory Board, we have LED streetlights coming, and of course education, when I mentioned that already, on May 3rd with the movie Before the Flood. As far as paving is concerned, and I'll cut it short after this, Our original budget for paving was $922,000. We recently, found out we're getting more money from the state, which brings our budget up to $1,016,000. So that's almost another $100,000, which is very nice. Cleanup day was this past Saturday. However, it really, in my opinion, should be called cleanup week, because you can still pick up bags at the Millwood Hardware Store, the Chapel Hardware Store, and even here at Town Hall. And the bags, these orange bags, are going to be collected on Monday, April 30th. So it's not too late to pick up your orange bag, fill it up, put it by the curb, and it'll be picked up. Thank you to the Newcastle Beautification Advisory Board, the Girl Scouts, and the Boy Scouts for helping this past Saturday. And that's pretty much it. I mentioned on Facebook, I certainly should mention it here, and I will make in my report. We have an internet purchase exchange location downstairs right in front of the police station. There's a 24-hour surveillance camera out there. So if you're going to make a purchase online, or you're selling or buying and you want to do the exchange, and you want to do it in a place where you feel safe, come to Town Hall, first floor, right outside the police station, and that's a place you should hopefully feel safe. And I want to say congratulations to Ben Lieberman on being selected to receive the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Lifesavers Award for public service. That ceremony is actually happening right now. He's down in San Antonio. And his dedication to reducing distracted driving deaths and injuries, and his commitment to keeping families safe on our roadways is being acknowledged. So congratulations. And that's it for me. Now on to Town Administrator's Report with Jill Shapiro.
Thank you. The town is going to be purchasing trees through the NIPA Fall Tree Program. NIPA will match every tree we purchase with another tree of the same species. They're going to be delivered in the fall. Several of the species that we selected will be ones that work well with the improvements slated for around municipal facilities. So we're anticipating being able to use these trees for town hall improvements, Chappaqua Performing Arts Center, Gedney Park, and other facilities. And again, the tree planting will be coordinated in the fall. Town and county taxes are now due. The collection continues through the end of April, and the last day to pay your 2018 town and county tax bill without penalty is Monday, April 30th. The tax office will be open on the 30th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The tax office also accepts United States postmark of April 30th as proof of timely mailing. If you're mailing your tax bill, make sure that you see the post office affix a postmark to the envelope. You can also use our free online system to pay your taxes either with a credit card or an ACH payment through our website, mynewcastle.org. And if you have any questions, please contact the tax office at 238-4773. As Rob commented, weather permitting, we will be paving in the downtown hamlet up King Street Hill, North Greeley, South Greeley, and Lower King Street. And then after that's done, we will be repainting the crosswalks in that area as well as the parking lines on Lower King. A number of people have commented to us, excuse me, that the crosswalks have vanished, and I'm going to try to put them back. And last, a well-deserved recognition. 2 individuals with very strong ties to Newcastle and the Millwood Water Treatment Plant received recognition at the annual meeting of the New York State section of the American Water Works Association. John Young received Operator of the Year Award, and Annie Zipkin received award for Young Professionals of the Year. Annie is a Newcastle resident, and she was an intern at the treatment plant several years ago. So congratulations to them both. Thank you.
Congratulations. And happy birthday to Steve Coleman, our
Happy birthday, Steve. You're the best.
esteemed environmental coordinator.
Happy birthday.
We're going to plant a tree in your favor, in your honor, in your favor. Okay, so public comment, new business. This is before the public hearings. Anybody have a public comment, new business? We're going to do the public, okay, so let's open the public hearings. Let's start with let's just go out of order. We'll start with the public hearing regarding a local law to amend Chapter 121 concerning tree preservation.
Okay, I
So-
move to open that public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Steve, did you want to speak on this, or are you just here for questions?
I'm just here for questions.
Okay.
Did we hear for this or for a different matter?
She's-
So I just wanted some clarity, and 121-4. That B, removal of any dead tree, hazardous tree, or other tree that creates or actual ongoing emergency condition. And then it goes on to say the town arborist may require verification and documentation of the emergency. Can you again just clarify, because I don't want to see happen is someone just take down a beautiful tree subjectively beautiful, whatever that may mean, a tree that they subjectively deem dangerous because it's 30 feet, 20 feet, 18 feet, whatever that is, from their home. And someone had sent us, for example, not directly on this point, obviously, but had sent us in their neighborhood, for lack of a better term, deforestation over time of trees. So is this the best way that you believe, and should it be, let me not ask a compound question. Is this the best way you believe to enforce and protect maintaining trees as opposed to people just subjectively knocking them down because they want to get rid of them and use this as an excuse because it's too close to my house? It's a pretty open-ended question, but
Answer. I mean, we looked at this issue, quite a bit. I mean, my concern over the past, 7 years when we, amended this in 2011, that was the definition that was put in, to give flexibility for, under emergency conditions, or that to allow homeowners to take action right away instead of waiting for the town to, complete a permit or, get a review. We did have other language in here, which the planning board and the environmental boards looked at as well. And, their concern is that they didn't want to make it too onerous,
so instead of
for,
may,
so what I struggle with is there's a few instances where people do take advantage of that, issue. But most of the time when someone has a hazardous condition, it's usually legitimate. And I do get calls, people asking what they should do, and, usually we allow them to take it down once they describe it or submit photos. I mean, one of the things we had in here is to suggest that they send us photos, which often you can tell, pretty easily, the condition of the tree.
if it's may as opposed to must.
Well, that was the concern, is the comments and feedback we got is we didn't want to make it that restrictive.
So, but basically then that takes all the wind out of the sails of this section, because if I don't have to give you anything, I'll tell you to take a hike.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's always been my concern, but the question is how much, leeway do you want to give a resident, without, being, too restrictive on that?
is it possible that, it's a must, but the violation doesn't necessarily mean that there's a fine? So at least and I just know from my own experience of seeing some neighbors who have taken down some trees that are gorgeous trees, and I'm shocked that they were able to take them down because they probably thought they're relatively close to a home without a permit.
I mean, the definition of hazardous tree, is defined in the code. So, I mean, there is some specific language, that we rely upon, so we can always do a follow-up enforcement. But, the challenge is really balancing, when there is a legitimate emergency and allowing someone to take care of that situation right away, versus having to wait to contact the town and have us, do an inspection or, follow it up. I mean, in some cases, it's a real safety issue.
Well, would you want to consider adding language saying, like proximity of a tree to a structure does not in and of itself make it a hazardous condition? So it's kind of requiring a separate step?
Another element that would.
Right.
I think something like that could be potentially reasonable. I think that's, so one can't say, oh, it's 20 feet, therefore by default.
It's hazardous.
Yeah,
Right.
the only concern I would have with that is, if we know about it, there's a certain liability, that the town would have.
We denied the person
Right.
the right, and then it fell a year later.
Right, or it fell, right after they talked about it as well. So, that's one of the concerns too, is I don't want to have the town put at risk, for, something that, may be a legitimate emergency.
Sending pictures, I mean, it's so easy nowadays.
That's true, but if there's no,
Yeah.
if there's no
Requirement.
enforcement.
Right, but there should be a requirement that they send pictures. It's easy to do.
Yeah.
That was some of the language we put in, which we, based on planning board comments and others, we, was taken back out. And, we still have that may require. I mean, if you don't feel that's strong enough, we can put that it is required.
I think shall, the goal here is not to penalize someone. The goal here is just to ensure that it legitimately is a dangerous tree in whatever capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can only speak from my experience, both when I was the town prosecutor and just that I've seen, that some gorgeous trees have been taken down for no reason other than someone wanted to put something else there.
We could even, create an email, tree at my Newcastle, something, and make it really easy. I mean, you could take a picture on your phone and email in 2 seconds.
Right. And odds are, there's never going to be something so hazardous that if it's, it's not going to be hanging over and they're getting somebody to cut it down instantly. Somebody's deeming it to be hazardous, getting permission, calling a tree company to come take it down.
And again, the penalty doesn't have to mandate any type of fine.
Right,
The penalty could be nothing up to something, and discretion allows it to be a nothing.
right. But maybe
Well,
we should
if
put
we
that
do put-
language about just proximity to a home does not.
Drew, have you seen, or can you ask some of your colleagues if they've seen, or have you seen anything that has that type of language that Lisa suggests? That beyond just proximity, there needs to be another element?
So I haven't seen that. Every municipality has a tree preservation law, and I haven't looked at all of them, so it might exist out there. I can search and see what I can find, something more. Usually you're taking pictures anyway of these trees, hazardous trees you're getting removed for insurance purposes. The reason it was may instead of shall, the thought was, if Steve's aware that there's a big storm, a Sandy comes through, he doesn't have to ask everybody for the documentation. The may was to put not as much pressure on our Steve over here.
Well,
But-
also on the
But
whole,
But
if
there
Sandy's
might
come
be-
through, it would already have fallen down. Then you don't need to worry about it.
or not,
Or
or it could,
teetering,
I mean, what happens is a lot of trees do get structurally impacted during storm.
Sure.
And they are hazardous, and people don't realize it until after they recover,
Well,
from
right.
the storm. So we're dealing with that now from the March storms, as there's a lot of requests for, people are just getting around now to cleaning their yards and a lot of storm damage, and snap trees and uprooted trees that, they're wondering whether they need a permit for.
Right, but that point being, I guess they've had plenty of time, they could send a picture.
Right. But we could
That's true.
also do something where
Because that
if the
was
tree is posing like an imminent danger, you could in the code put then email it to, I think the email is police desk, I forgot what it is, but it's police desk in my Newcastle. And it's just a question of like ordinary course of business, somebody would prefer to take down a tree because they've been meaning to do it for a while and they're finally getting to doing it, then they could just email it to whatever. So we take some of the liability off us by putting the onus on them to take a different course of action when it's in imminent danger.
Sure, it's like actually hanging somewhere,
Right.
that's
And then-
different.
then it goes to the police. It's like calling the police, because they do actually monitor that email. And it could also go to the town administrator, it can go to even the town board. We could get a lot of people on that email and, so.
Just, if we do go that route of changing it, we just need to look carefully at the definition for hazardous tree too, because there's a lot of overlap in how that's interpreted, so.
Do you think it would change it, and I think this language was discussed, if we said the property owner shall provide verification and photograph documentation to the environmental coordinator upon removal of a hazardous tree in an emergency condition?
Or at a
Shouldn't it
reasonable
be
time thereafter?
Or a reasonable time thereafter to,
Right.
to,
You could
we'll
define
def-
reasonable time as 72
we'll define,
hours
yeah.
thereafter, so that if there's a way for Steve or whomever the Steve is in 25 years from now to be able to say, all right, this is clearly not, but I had the chance to look at the picture 2 days later.
And maybe we should add something there, and if the property owner feels that the tree poses an imminent danger to the life or safety, blah, 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 then call the police department. We take it out of the tree ordinance. You should be calling the police department,
Do they want that responsibility?
Well, at least it's, just, I agree, I hear what you're saying, but, you don't want an imminent danger to get caught up in this.
But then the imminent danger, I
Process.
think the imminent danger is they're allowed to take the tree down, but they're also required to
Oh,
take a
just send it
picture of
back.
it.
Take a photo.
right, because they can send it within
So that-
72
That's right,
hours.
you're right, you're right,
72
right.
hours,
That's
they-
perfect, you're right, I forgot, you're right.
That's what?
I said you're right.
I think it's perfect.
The language is perfect. You were not perfect. You were right.
Okay, so we'll shift it around, so the burden, the responsibility is the property owners when they're invoking this as of right hazardous tree removal, to take a photo, that there be some documentation.
Day and age, everyone's got the phone.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
it's not an issue, and that way they'll forward it to Steve, and the onus isn't on him.
And the other change, I mean, I think the planning board, the original language was, we required certification from a tree arborist that it was hazardous, and that could be a lot of work. Now we're just saying some sort of verification, photograph documentation to give the town something.
But
So it's
Steve,
not the
can
same.
you tell, I mean, it's one thing if there's an imminent danger, maybe you can tell, a tree's cut in half from lightning or whatever it is, but, I mean, like I had that beautiful tree right next to my house that was like stunning, but it was, from the outside, it looked fine, except it was hollow and totally rotting and was gonna actually fall. But you would never have been able to tell that from a picture. I had to have you come out, or somebody came out and looked at it.
I mean, photos are good for looking at, what I would consider more imminent danger kind of things. And, if there's snaps or if you can see, a prominent lean in the tree or, uprooting of the root system. But usually with a photograph, there's enough telltale signs that, if I don't feel comfortable, I would say I'd have to really take a look at the tree. Yeah, but there are a lot of diagnostic signs that you can look at in terms of the
Right.
branching and.
And I think
So I don't know that we just want to limit it to pictures, though, because anyone could snap a picture and,
But if they took it down, they could take a picture of the tree when it's.
Of the hollow
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
tree, and then it'll be obvious that, oh, this is
Right.
why we took it down. It's
Yeah.
small
And I
things.
think it's not gonna be so rampant, it's a deterrent.
Right. I think it adds, by having documentation, it gives us the opportunity to, if we're concerned about it, say, well, wait a minute, let me come out and look at it and, before you make that decision.
I mean,
And
if you took it
Lisa,
down.
I'm sorry, Rob.
I was gonna say, if you took it down, you're gonna look for the best pictures to show.
right, right,
Right.
right. That's true.
And when I just said it, I said photograph documentation. The language there now is just verification and documentation. I could just leave it as is. I don't have to add the word photograph. I was just thinking of it.
I think you should.
Should. So it would,
Yeah.
and verification, I mean, it's verification and/or photograph documentation which demonstrates the emergency condition.
Verification and
Yeah,
Just and,
Right.
and/or.
well, and or is different. And,
And/or is different than and.
Yeah, I
Right.
think,
We just want and.
yeah. I think
Have
we'll
a
leave it at it.
verification besides the photographs, so something.
Well,
from-
Have an
verification,
arborist
I mean,
say, like,
they're more than likely they're gonna consult with the tree company right away, so,
Or even short notice, because it's falling, then you could approve it after the fact.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
okay.
Public hearing is open.
Hi, everybody. Cynthia Manatorian, 100 Glendale Road. I am actually shocked that there's nobody else in the room to talk about what you all clearly care about, the comp plan cared about. It's really surprising, but I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk about the tree ordinance. I know that you've received submissions already from me, but I have more. And I wanted tonight to talk about how Newcastle has many different areas. It has Chappaqua, Millwood as the hamlets, but it has many different topographies, vegetative sites. You have people who live in beautiful suburban environments. You have a main street. You have concerns for what that looks like and the fact that everyone cares about green. And then you have where I live, which is the West End. And it seems to me when I look at the tree ordinance that you can't really hope that your one tree ordinance fits all. And I'm asking that maybe you reconsider the tree ordinance much in the way you have different zoning requirements, where you have your commercial zone and you have your, I'm not sure if you go down to a quarter acre in Newcastle, but you have multiple different zones that require different kinds of respect and management and sustainability of the nature that we all enjoy, whether it's the beautiful single tree or the woods. So I'm going to take you through the West End and the woods to talk about how I don't think that this tree ordinance really covers the needs of the woods. Is that okay?
Mhm.
All right, so I brought a few handouts. I'm kind of glad you're not a complete set because neither am I. My ink ran out.
But just as you're handing that out, just say, we have received a lot of written comments and similar things to this. No, but we've had some people send us, 10-page comments with pictures, so I don't want you to think the lack of people here. There are some people who have been sending a lot of submissions. They're doing similar things to what you've done here.
So you'll know that if the back has ink, I still had ink. And then, I don't know if you want me to resubmit where I have it complete set.
We could share.
Just provide, Kira
I
with
can
a
give you
copy.
this set afterward.
Yeah, we can
Oh,
make
that's
copies
perfect.
just so-
That's perfect.
We'll scan it
fine.
and email it.
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through. First map that you have is the Croton to Highlands Biodiversity Map. And it's not a map that I created, but it does include Biodiversity Hub number 13, Teatown Lake Reservation and vicinity. And what you'll see, the yellow highlight triangle is the complete west end of Newcastle. And it's attached to the entire biodiversity corridor of basically the Hudson River west end of Westchester. And what's important about that is where you see the speckled area, it shows you there's important, significant biodiversity there and woodlands. So trying to figure out what's important for sustaining forest and woodlands might be different than trying to figure out what's important for sustaining, good neighbors in a tighter area. This same area, which is the West End, is also primarily the Indian Brook Reservoir watershed, which is in yellow, the next map. And it's interesting that the reservoir actually is in Ossining, and 30,000 or so residents of Ossining depend on that water, but in fact, it's drawing its water substantially from the west end of Newcastle. So I live on Glendale Road, which is this road that runs literally through that watershed. And the trees on either side are very important. The woodlands are important there. And it's worth kind of a different approach to what matters on the West End with regard to trees. I'm also sharing with you from another issue in town, I call it my double bullseye map, which what's interesting here is that you have the aquifer that's being considered for a project in Newcastle, the Sunshine Home expansion, a 1,500-foot ring and a 2,500-foot ring to double check that well water of the Newcastle residents won't be impacted. And well water has everything to do with the way in which water absorbs or percolates down through the ground, and that has everything to do with the forest and the root systems and protecting from, sudden runoff of water into the streets and gutters as opposed to into the aquifer. And actually something that hasn't been brought up except by Sabrina, I think, but it's coming, is the Hudson Institute turning into the Hudson Ridge Wellness Center. What's interesting about that for Newcastle is they own more acreage in Newcastle than they actually do in Croton.
We've actually inquired, is my recollection.
You have,
Yes, with their town
but it's
board.
coming because they're really activating coming up.
Inquired, for example, about how, if at all, that's going to impact the aquifer.
Right. I don't think the deep dive has been done, but all to say that this double bullseye lands straight in the Ossining watershed. So, and the trees all through here are significant, including along the roads. Now I'm going to draw your attention, and I'm happy to send you a written letter to kind of substantiate the photos as well. But what you see on the top as best as I could do, because I'm not a millennial, is I found through Google Earth, there's like a slight arch that you barely see. That's Glendale, Spring Valley, and again, the watershed running through. And it's super green, and granted, they're not providing me on Google Earth with the same time of year for the bottom one, which is the same Glendale, Spring Valley. But do you see that kind of light beige line that runs all the way along? That light beige line is actually the cut trees that Con Ed came through and just surprised everyone with. And I know that, Jill, you tried to do a community meeting on that, and Con Ed didn't storm harden, they just tree massacred. But they should be accountable through your tree code. There is no real description of responsibility on town right-of-way and what happens on town right-of-way. But the fact of the matter is, when they came in and clear-cut on this side, if you go back to the Indian Brook watershed map, they cut tree canopy clear across over the watershed. And what happens in summer when you don't have that tree canopy? That watershed is going to dry up more than it would with tree canopy, including the root systems, etc., in the watershed that keep that water there. So Con Ed really owes you guys, in my mind, big, and they own Village of Ossining big. They just, and I know you've had your own Con Ed issues in March, but this is more of that. It's completely irresponsible of them. I'm pretty sure, because I live right across the street from the watershed piece, that they came through without any discussion with Village of Ossining. And the truth of the matter is, that piece of land is actually owned by the Village of Ossining. And I think Con Ed treated it as just nobody owns it, so we don't have to worry about this one. But we all have to worry when water is involved in, our sustainable environment. So I would ask that you look at your new tree code to think about how different organizations doing work on your right-of-way should be responsible for what they do in the bigger picture, and how to supervise them and have expectations of them. So these are actually some pictures. This is a before and after of Spring Valley and Hawks and all of what was there. And then suddenly they came along. This was the Con Ed guys. And I mean, it looks like a bad movie, but they just cut clear across. You have these big logs. I have many pictures of big logs stacked up, and it's literally right by entering public drinking water supply watershed area, Indian Brook. And then here, that's literally in the Indian Brook watershed. They just hatcheted deep into that band along Glendale, not just a 10-foot. I'm not sure what they considered to be their right-of-way, 10 or 15, or I don't remember.
Wasn't it from a distance from the middle of the road or something, right?
But they went deep in and across Glendale Road, which, by the way, as far as the comp plan is concerned, really changed the bucolic nature of our street, also big time. Currently, to either side of me, 2 homes heading to Spring Valley Road and the 2 homes heading to Quaker Bridge and Ridge Road are for sale. They get that this area is at great risk of really changing, and they're all on the market. So I think you should know that, because those are all Newcastle residents. Then I want to show you also from the Con Ed. So you got money to redo Spring Valley Road,
No, we didn't get money.
or you decided you weren't waiting anymore,
We got
We were
rejected.
denied.
but you redid, you paved.
We had
Right.
to, we had
You
to
found
pay-
money.
We had, no, what happens is we applied for FEMA reimbursement.
Yes.
We were told we couldn't repave it while the application was pending. We finally got word that our application was denied, and then we immediately put it on the paving schedule.
And, okay, and so you repaved, and what you're looking at here is a repaved road and the Con Ed trees. This is Spring Valley Road, gone along the side of the road, and this is what you get. you don't get the water properly staying on the hillsides. You get the water in the road. So again, you know, I don't know that, and interestingly enough, they cut all of this side of the picture, but you see where the lines are? Other side. So I think your tree ordinance really has to take those kinds of ideas into consideration and expect Con Ed to step up, and Verizon and all these other people who need to do road work on what you maintain as your town property, at least on our end. Then I wanted to talk about,
Well, that should be anywhere. It's not just
oh
your
yeah,
end.
anywhere,
That should be
exactly,
anywhere.
anywhere. I think it should be put in, absolutely. But it's a stronger feel on the west end when you just have that kind of clear cutting.
What I had,
I actually, I agree, like visually it is, but I think, to
Mostly
your
might
point,
not
if
be.
they're gonna cut trees down, they should have to abide by our tree policy, whether it's 1 tree or 1,000 trees, no matter where it is.
well, you know, what I had suggested, for different reasons, what I had suggested is that they should have to contribute to either the tree fund or plant some other trees. Because if you don't want people to get, first of all, what they did in the West End is a whole different story.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, I'm not even talking about that, but I'm just talking about when they come and they, a lot of people, you know, nobody likes power failures, nobody likes blocked roads and closed schools, we all get that. And we want, you know, the lines to be somewhat protected, but we also care about trees. So if, you know, there has to be a system in place that if they're gonna take down a tree to protect their equipment, which is okay in certain
Understood.
situations, they should be replacing a tree or at least giving money for a tree fund, so that all concerns are being addressed. And right now, the only concerns that are being addressed are the concerns about protecting their equipment. They're not addressing the fact that trees have been removed and they're not being replaced. And that is a concern.
And I started, you know, you start with any topic and you wind up in a deep dive. It's endless, the amount of information that's out there. I have a lot that I'm not going to bore you with tonight, but there are tree codes that do include expectations of the utilities
I
and
think we
how
should
they,
definitely-
Yeah, we're gonna look at that.
I don't think you get pushback from any one of us.
Yep.
just saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
We definitely should do that.
And then I wanted,
Double pole stuff, there's no reason why we give them a free pass.
and then I also wanted to talk about, and I don't have it clear enough in my head, but the notion of replacement and how Chappaqua Millwood replacement of trees isn't like the West End. So the notion of, for instance, replacing trees with 50% tree, 30% shrub, 20% ground cover, I think it was, is the new formula, wouldn't necessarily work in the West End because of the deer. You know, I took this picture on Saturday. Do you see any shrubs? Do you see, this is in my 22 acres of untouched land since I own it, and I own it since 1998, and it's never been built, so, you know. I think it was forested at some point, you know, for farmland back in the 1800s, but there are no shrubs, there is no ground cover because we have so many deer and other wildlife, and I guess that's not fantastic in terms of biodiversity and sustainability, but that is the way this forest is evolving currently. And if we were expected to replace a tree with shrub or ground cover in the West End, it would be gone unless we fenced it. So I don't know if the one law concept fits the whole town. So I'd like you to consider that. You know, again, maybe part of the zoning of the town takes a look at the tree expectations in each zone.
Steve, it doesn't mandate that you put in shrubs, it just gives you the ability to put in shrubs, right?
That's correct. That's correct. It's an option, you know, that's available. Instead of, they can do up to a third replacement with shrubs, and there's a formula of 8 shrubs per equivalent to 1 tree replacement.
Right, but they don't have to.
They don't have to. It's an option to help provide, especially in the regulated landscape buffers, which is the, you know, between people's homes, is to, you know, create more structural diversity so that there's a better buffer but it still is incumbent upon the homeowner to, take precautions like fencing and doing deer sprays and other things, because it's not unique to the West End. It's, deer browsing and the pressure from deer is everywhere. It's not restrictive just to, a certain area of town.
I mean, I had that issue myself. I took down some trees, and I wanted to put in shrubs, and I was told I can't, which is fine. I put up trees, but I did ask that question.
Yeah, but the whole thrust is to give the option to encourage people to create a better sustainable habitat. And it does require maintenance. It does require being proactive with managing deer.
Is your concern that people will put up shrubs for the wrong reasons, knowing that I want to have the space open, I'll take down the trees, I'll put up shrubs, they're going to be gone in 2 years, and I'll have the space open again? Or is that not your
I
issue?
mean, you're ahead of me on that. I didn't even think that far.
Okay,
I
so-
just,
So then maybe, so then, that's what I was thinking you were getting
Yeah.
at. So with the may, that may then satisfy this particular concern.
it could, but then I'm going to move on to another aspect of the sustainability piece, which is back to the biodiversity. There is no requirement for removing dead trees to come to the town and talk about it, and I think they're in the code. And I think maybe pretty loose on trees that are in decline. But actually, when you're in the forest and you're looking at biodiversity, you need all of that for the forest sustainability. So I think that if you care about this biodiversity corridor and all the management of wildlife and things that are in the comp plan, in fact, it's not the same as caring about it on Main Street or in the tighter zoned areas. For somebody to go out, to go on a large piece of property in the West End and clean it out of dead wood and et cetera, is actually endangering the regeneration and the biodiversity. Even the ability for saplings to take root depends on some of the decomposing matter from these pieces of tree, over time in the wetlands and so forth. It acts as a complete system, wouldn't you say? In the forest.
I would agree with some of the statements, but it's, you need to look at a much bigger picture in terms of, the purpose for the tree ordinance and, regulating on residential properties. It's a balance between, the interests of the individual and regulating broader goals like biodiversity and tree canopy cover and, other benefits that trees provide.
Right.
And with dead trees, it's often a safety issue. I mean, we don't purposely go out and tell homeowners to take a tree down, but usually if it's a dead tree, there's a safety issue associated with it, and a resident is not comfortable leaving it. I mean, it's their choice if they wanted to, but if they choose to take it down, we didn't feel that it was a critical component that we should be regulating because of the public safety issue.
And I don't think, barring a development which would have other approvals, someone's going to for your forest, for example, just to remove, why? Why would they remove dead trees? I mean, why would you accept that cost to do that? Why would you want to do that? And if there's a development, then there's a much bigger issue, which there's much other levels of approval, and maybe they need a variance or whatever it may be. But I think this is more tailored, as what Steve was saying, to either smaller lots or more individual, less trees, because there's no rational reason, barring, again, a big development, someone would go into the woods generically to take down trees unless they had a permit or a variance to be able for them, allow them to do that.
Well, so barring a big development, the reason that I have read and learned about things I never thought I would pay any attention to is because there is a big proposed development coming in next door to me.
I saw you going there. I saw you starting here.
No, I wasn't going to go there necessarily, but the point of the tree ordinance is that in the West End, where you have this forest environment, 300 some odd trees have been special permitted to be cut down without including, for instance, the younger trees that are less than 4 caliber in the count. And at the end of the day, for tree replacement, the 300 some odd trees that are being counted, I'm not sure if it's 4 inch or 6 inch for those and above. It's one or the other. There are all sorts of different variables, but the formula for tree replacement and tree bank is based on only the healthy trees, when in fact taking all the 300 some odd trees down in the West End does impact the forest and the sustainability of the West End.
That is an interesting,
So it's different
that
issues.
is, I see that. I mean, that is a good question. Is there something that, going forward, maintains the environmental or ecological stability, knowing that even dead or dying trees provide a value,
And
necessary?
I would also add, just let me just, I would add to her other point, is that, I mean, if I took down 3 trees, it could affect my neighbor, you know, whatever, but for the most part, it's not gonna have a big environmental impact. But if somebody's taking down 300 trees, it does have an impact beyond their borders, and I think that's your point that you started out with.
Right.
So there should be some, you know, something in there that, you know, if anything, it should be more of a donation to a tree bank or replacement, just because not only are you taking down 300 trees, but you're affecting, you know, off your property as well.
I think the argument is actually different. It's not that it should be put into a tree bank, that it should be more of a restriction in the first
Right,
place to allow it
that's
to
the same,
happen.
they
Because
shouldn't
if you're gonna take
be
down
allowed.
300 some odd trees or what, stuff, use
Well,
an
300 that
example.
are counted.
Right, whatever it may be.
And not even counted, only the healthy ones of those that are big enough are being
Right,
counted.
so I'm in agreement with you.
Right.
By putting money into a tree bank that might help the east side of town, it's not gonna change the environmental impact
On the west
on
side.
that, or whatever it may be, wherever it may be.
Sure.
So it needs to be more restrictive when it's such a large scale and take into consideration trees that are dying dead, lower, smaller trees that, I'm just not skilled enough in this arena to use it.
Right, it's
Yeah,
a deep
couple-
dive.
Couple of things to look at is the planning board does take that into consideration. We currently do not have a biodiversity ordinance or anything like that. It, relies on steep slopes and wetlands and trees and, stormwater. We have individual ordinances that address different elements of that. But when it comes to, a bigger development, there's a lot of analysis that goes into looking at, why the trees have to be removed and where they're located, and then the tree ordinance is designed to look at replacement. I mean, we do 50% replacement, and there's, often, it's 3 to 1 or greater that there's a number of trees being replanted. Yes, they're smaller size to start with, but, the one benefit of the replacement is that we're actually creating better, in many cases, better habitat for the future, by the requirements of the tree ordinance on bigger projects. For example, we have Brandywine and others where, we were able to do a lot of good, replanting so that we can reestablish a good viable functioning system. I mean, trees are a living resource, and they succumb to a lot of different things. And so the replanting, especially on the level that's required with 50% of the diameter, we're putting a substantial number of trees back. And, that's a long-term benefit. Yes, there is an impact and a change to a site, but, you're balancing that with, for example, like on, the Sunshine property, what's not included is they're adding an additional 80 trees to the wetland restoration. That's not even included in the, replacement criteria for, the regular tree ordinance, for the rest of the property. So I mean, there's a lot of benefits that go into it, but I mean, that's addressed more on a planning board level when they're, looking at the whole site and trying to balance, the environmental concerns with, the development and making sure that all the, key issues are identified and addressed.
Should be something to consider then, moving forward with the tree ordinance, also on a separate biodiversity ordinance that ultimately could be used in conjunction.
I mean, there's very few biodiversity ordinances available. I mean, we looked into it several years ago when we did the, Croton Highlands Biotic Corridor that was done at the time through the Bronx Zoo and the Metropolitan Conservation Alliance, and I was part of the team on that. And we looked at creating an ordinance where you had to take into consideration wildlife impacts and other things, but we found that it was very difficult to find language and regulations that could be enforced and easily, worked with in the context of a typical ordinance that a town may have. I mean, what any larger development project, there's biodiversity studies done. I mean, and there's different regulatory agencies that occur. I mean, the Fish and Wildlife Service gets involved with. There's certain species that have to be studied. I mean, we look at, we do get, basic reports on, species as part of that. So, I mean, we're addressing it, but we don't have a specific ordinance or anything that deals just with that topic.
Well, I don't want to take a deep dive on that topic, but it would seem to me that those agencies are severely under-resourced themselves, and so oftentimes they ask for an inventory report from the developer and then agree with the report. Thank you for the report. They're not sending people out to do months of field work to see if endangered bat species are residing on the property or not, that require a tree in decline versus a healthy, whatever it is that is needed for a habitat to be sustained. They don't have the funding to really go through that. And I think, Newcastle has tried to be ahead of the curve on certain initiatives like the BAG initiative. And since you are looking at the tree code right now, you've completed your comp plan, I think you have different parts of your town, which is what makes it a rich community, a wonderful community to live in, one where if I want to come to Main Street for a restaurant or to shop, I come east. If you want to go hiking, you come west. It's all in the same town. So I'm just not sure that the tree ordinance at this time goes deep enough. And one of the things that's exciting to me is that since those studies were done that Steve was a part of, more people have come on board to understand how important our natural resources are. So, maybe there is better language now and more people to talk to. And we have Google, which, makes it easier to learn about how other people are doing it. Next one. So speaking about the way things are handled, this is an example of the building department issued a retaining wall permit after some trees were cut and some steep slopes were damaged. And I'm sorry, I clipped it the wrong way, but the very back page is where the work was done and where the steep slope is that requires a retaining wall retroactively. But what you also see here are these mature, healthier trees with all this demolition debris that has been sitting there since November 30th and still this weekend, compacting the roots of the trees and making their survival far less likely over time. These are very mature, several of them are evergreen. And so I would ask that when work gets done that's not done properly and the trees are involved, and these trees going to a more suburban approach definitely screen me from my neighbor. And in my lifetime, you can't plant a tree that will be this size anytime soon. They deserve the appropriate supervision and mitigation. So, now we're in growth season. Nothing has changed since November 30th. These trees are in serious jeopardy because of the way the roots are being compacted by the soil. Meanwhile, the ordinance, the building department, said you need a retaining wall, which is probably true. But the truth is that that needs careful review by the town too. If you put retaining walls and foundations and you dig where major tree roots are, and this is the case, those trees are coming down anyway. You will damage them. So I just think the tree ordinance needs more teeth, needs more Steve Coleman to get in there and, tell people how it needs to be and how to treat the trees properly and protect them, the ones that we have. And I don't know what the penalties would be. I'm not sure, that's really been looked at carefully either, what you have at your disposal if people are not behaving the right way. The other picture I have is this one, which was in my letter. So this is right my property. This is Glendale Road. And, in this particular case, you see trees being cut, and this was a tree that you had selected that needed to come down. But we were never notified, and it did not say Town of Newcastle on the side of the truck. And honestly, anyone could pull up and cut trees, and are we as residents of the town just supposed to go, oh, somebody's cutting a tree on the right-of-way? Okay. There's a sense of safety, security, knowing that the right people showed up at the right time. And so I was pretty upset at receiving, this was somebody else took this picture, I wasn't even there, and sent it to me and said, are you cutting trees? Like shocked that I'm cutting trees. And I was like, no, I don't know who's cutting trees, and found out it was a chosen tree to be cut in this environment. I'm not clear why, but it was in decline and maybe had some particular need to come down, disease. But notification to the town about things that the town has actually contracted for would be great in the tree code. Or notification for anyone who the town approves to do work would be great for town residents. And I wanted to just talk about the water as it relates to planting trees that are cut on the west end. You need to water them for them to survive. So I would like the tree code to have a longer time of supervision for the trees that are planted. Because on the west end, we don't have a lot of water. The likelihood is you just kind of stop watering when you don't have a lot of water. And on that point, I wanted to just add a little concept for your recycling, where we're no longer allowed to have recycle bags to have the garbage in the bag, and the need to clean the recycle item appropriately so you don't have half the pizza in the box in the recycle bin. Some of those objects require a lot of water, so I'm not sure which is better, because we're on wells. And we're also in the middle of the woods, so to not be able to bag it and keep the aroma down is problematic for infestation and animals and so forth and so on. So
That wasn't, I hear your point, but
Yeah.
that's not,
that's not a tree thing. since I'm
It's
here.
up to the-
it's
up
not
to
a
the town.
it's not a policy decision that we made. In
Yeah.
other words, saying, there's no tie into our plastic bag ordinance. It's basically, this
Just
is
happen
coming
at the
from
same time.
Well, it actually
Ish.
was separated by year, but it's coming from our recycling provider that it clogs their machines. And if
They
you
won't
actually,
take it
if you actually Google it, you mentioned Google, if you actually
Yeah.
Google it, and you'll see that it's a problem that happens throughout the country, that these plastic bags, they clog up the recycling machines.
Interesting.
A lot of, and this is a rule that it's actually been on the books for a while, but they started enforcing it. They basically said we just can't do it anymore. So that's why. So we had nothing to do with it.
So they don't actually sort recyclable items before those objects, those
Well, it's single streams, so
materials.
it's all
It all just
one, and I don't know how they internally do it, but I don't know that answer. But
Interesting.
But yeah, it came from our recycling company, and
Might
that's
be
why you
useful to
actually
post
have.
that on the town website.
Well, it has been, when I mean,
missed that.
this was enacted as of January 1st of 2018.
Right,
So it was in the newsletter, like every month it's on the website, because a lot of people, were upset about it.
right.
But the fact is that, and that's also why, if you look at like, Rite Aid and some of these stores, they actually collect these plastic
Bags.
bags. They have special containers, because those go to special
Places.
places, yeah.
Interesting.
refresh
Okay,
my recollection,
well,
what's our notice requirement for neighbors in this statute? Yeah.
It's 100 feet, and it's anyone with, it's on all four sides of their property, so it's any adjacent property owner within 100 feet.
Be advised of,
But it's specific to if you're taking 3 or more trees, you have to do a notification, but it's,
irrespective of the size of your property?
it doesn't matter if it's 3 or more trees.
So maybe that should change too, or we should discuss, because if you're on a smaller plot, or even for that matter, a larger lot, and it's right adjacent, there should be maybe a distance requirement that's significantly smaller if it's just one, as opposed to 3 within 100 feet. And I'm making up the number, maybe it's 1 within 20 feet of a property line, because,
Well, they would be notified, it's within 100 feet,
but, I
so
think- but right, but it's a 3
if you're
tree.
taking 3 or more trees.
Right, so if we're taking one,
Yeah, there is no notification on
maybe
that.
that should,
I mean, when that was set up, previously, the town board at the time was very concerned about making, giving the individual resident the right to, manage their property and trying to balance, when
to,
it became an issue, and they came up with three or more trees as being what they felt was more of an impact and, should be a
so
notification.
there's, we can discuss among ourselves, but I think, or publicly too, but I think that if it's even one tree within a certain distance, and maybe even a certain size, irrespective of whether it's other trees are coming.
I just would question the ability to communicate that effectively, and it adds a tremendous administrative load.
And it's just a notice
And
requirement.
and all we do is a notice requirement. There's no public hearing for the tree ordinance. So
And your neighbor
neighbors can
can't
find out
object.
about it, but there's really, no hearing or anything.
Then why bother even having 3?
Well, because at the time they felt that it was a way to at least give the immediate adjacent homeowners, knowledge that they were going to be removing some trees.
But there's there's nothing he or she can do?
Not the way it's currently set up. I mean, they can challenge through an appeal process, the decision. If we issue a permit, there is an appeal process in the code. They can appeal to the Environmental Review Board or file an Article 78 if it's again, if it's a planning board or zoning board, decision.
They can also submit, their objections to the approval of, to the environmental coordinator, and he could take that into account if he so, chooses, looks at it. And then if he issues a decision, they can then appeal that.
In my experience, I mean, I think it's been helpful to have the notification, because it forces the neighbors to talk to their neighbor and let them know that they're taking trees down.
I don't want to kill us too much here now, considering it's already almost 9:45. But maybe we can discuss the value of, even if it's one tree of a certain size or a certain location. So it's not every tree, but if I have 5 feet from my property line, my neighbor's taking a jugunda tree down, I should have the opportunity to be heard or know that it's coming down. Maybe if it's a 3-inch diameter, 2-inch diameter, that's nothing, but one big tree on my property line is something I should know. I shouldn't have to be 3.
So, regulated trees are all at least 4 dBH. We have defined specimen tree. So if we wanted to put 3 trees or a specimen tree, because those are the larger trees, that's something to consider. The concern was originally about the how much work that would be for one tree, and the restriction on the property owner to take one tree down, but there's other things to consider as well.
So we could
Can-
definitely talk about it. I mean, there are property rights involved, and, you know, we have to consider those as well. I mean, you're not gonna have people show up at this public hearing, fighting for property rights like you will for the people that are, you know, concerned about the trees. But I think we as a town board need to take that into consideration.
You know, I thought the issue was really that you wanted to be able to notify neighbors of like a large-scale tree removal. And not, I think one tree is a big onus. I mean, I would let my neighbor know if I was taking down a tree anyway, but I think to go through a formal notice process might be,
It depends the size of the tree, right? I mean,
even so, if it's falling down, I mean,
we don't have to dwell on it too much now, but just to think, it's the public hearing is
Yeah.
still open, so we can still discuss it.
Can I ask, the 3 trees or more, only within 100 feet, or 3 trees or more, period? So what if it's 500 feet from anybody's property line?
No.
The West End, that
it's-
happens all the
it's
time.
The tree permit, the notification is based on the number of trees being proposed to be removed.
Number of trees, not
So
distance
it's-
from.
No, and the notification is 100 feet from the property line on all 4 sides.
Just who your neighbors are, no matter how far away they are from
Right,
that
it's based on your
location on your
line.
property.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it's within 100 feet of your, if you were taking the application, it would be 100 feet on all 4 sides, so all your neighbors would
Not
be
from where the tree
notified.
is,
All
on the
right,
property line.
okay, thank you. And then finally, speaking of taking up this topic and looking at it further, do you expect to offer another public meeting
Yeah.
on the topic?
I would expect, but I don't think we're closing it yet.
It's not closing today.
Not closing. All right, very good. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Good night. Are you leaving? Anybody else?
You're welcome.
I missed the beginning of what you were, that's what I'm covering, so I'll stay here. Sure. Hello. I'm glad to hear that the public hearing's staying open, because a few folks have really wanted to either come or weigh in, and they haven't had the chance to yet, so. So I'm Victoria Alzapidi. I just wanted to share some comments written by a bunch of us and signed on by a bunch of folks, too. So, although honestly, it's only the beginning of the signer honors, because we didn't get to reach out very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So obviously, I won't go through this verbatim. I don't want to take up that much time. But basically, the sense is that there are a lot of good edits in the most recent draft of the 19th, and what follows here are some additional revisions, thoughts, suggestions that we are hoping that you can consider before the law is finalized, the tree preservation law is finalized. So looking at the legislative intent, we just thought to add a little bit of additional language, which you can see right here. One is about the benefit of trees protecting each other from the wind, and as wind becomes an increasing issue with climate challenges, that's something to consider. And also, because the intention of this legislation has a lot to do with the environment and wildlife, we wanted to kind of spell out that trees really do play a critical role in nesting sites for birds, for beneficial insects, and other wildlife. The applicability around the definitions, just to make sure that it's explicitly stated that commercial properties are also included. The clearing issue is an interesting one. The suggestion was made to reduce the number from 10 to 6. Although, you know, it's just kind of a question of, is 10 arbitrary, is 6 arbitrary? It seems like 10 is a lot, and so looking at whether there's any precedent for lowering the number of trees, because 6 trees, especially if you're talking about big trees, has a huge impact. And then we looked at a bunch of other towns' tree ordinances, and one language suggestion that we had is, instead of saying within a calendar year, to say within any 12-month period, just because someone could kind of at the end of one year and then the beginning of the next. Dead tree is always an interesting question. We wanted to kind of spell out that it would be determined by the environmental coordinator or a certified arborist putting in writing. We think there's possibly a lot of stuff happening where an arborist makes a suggestion that's not in writing, and it kind of elevates the onus upon them to really prove that there's nothing that can be done with the tree. The hazardous tree question is really interesting, and not sure exactly what to do with that language, but in an attempt to kind of raise the bar a little bit, because structural defect, there are many trees with structural defects that aren't really a danger, and it's kind of a subjective relativity question there. So we put the word significant in, which is such a tricky legal word anyway. It doesn't really mean anything. But they're hoping to kind of think about how else could we modify that to kind of ramp up the standard a little bit. And then on the next page, again, we just added under the removal definition the 12-month period instead of the calendar year. And then there's a strong feeling to restore the significant tree list, even though it hasn't been utilized in our town. There really may be times where, especially if people knew, I think a lot of people don't know, even on the Conservation Board, we really never kind of sat down and said, let's look at what might be the significant trees. And I think there's value to doing that. And so people really felt strongly about putting that back in, and also adding that in addition to trees being, a special tree, so to speak, being considered a specimen tree or having historical significance or other characteristics that are important, that it could be a critical wildlife habitat tree.
Couldn't that section that you just put in there, you could really use that for anything, pretty much. You could say any area where you don't want development, like, let's say, for example, property that the school board owns, and they're gonna develop 6 houses, and the money's gonna go towards the school district and our kids' education. You could basically try to stop that development by that little paragraph, by saying that's wildlife specimen, and therefore you shouldn't develop. You could really use that for anything, can't you? This little paragraph, you could really stop all development by saying that it's for wildlife protection. Isn't that what that paragraph's really about?
Well, the paragraph was in the legislation historically until the recent edits. The wildlife piece.
This definition is very different than what was in the
Yeah, no, I know.
original code, because
I know what this definition is trying to do, but
This definition was cut and pasted from,
that's not how it's worded in the
What?
current ordinance.
or you know what, this is from the one that's online.
The significant tree list was a voluntary thing, and that a homeowner would have to agree to have their tree listed. There was
Right.
nothing to do with town property or anything else. I mean,
Just so you know,
strictly
I pulled this directly from the code. So it may not
This
be
is
in the
written
most,
very
I
different
couldn't
than
cut
the
and
code.
paste the revised version because it was a PDF, but I was able to pull the language from the code online for expediency.
It's different than what the definition is.
Okay, so I would have no issue with the definition. I mean, I shouldn't say that.
No, but
I would
the
have to
intent-
look at
The
it.
intention in the definition in the current code is a lot different than this language.
In what respect?
Well, I can-
Because the only thing I was thinking I was adding were those 3 words, critical wildlife habitat
No,
for the
but I mean,
code
we
that's
don't-
online.
But that's my
I'll address that in 1 second.
my point. That could really be used to stop.
I'll definitely address that, but I'm just concerned that, I just wanted to be clear that the optics are correct here, that I literally pulled this thinking it was the version online.
I mean, it's a very different intent. The Conservation Board shall begin compiling the town's significant tree list as defined upon enactment of this chapter and through nominations from tree owners, town
Steve,
historian,
where are you
or other
getting that
interested
from?
party.
Which version?
Code. This is our existing code, chapter
This is, it says this somewhere, because I pulled it.
21.7. It's right in our existing code.
Okay, well, that's fine. Can you read that language out loud, please? Would you mind?
Through nominations from tree owners, the town historian, or other interested parties for recommendation to the town board for inclusion on the town's significant tree list. A tree may not be designated as significant without designation by the town board and without the consent of a tree owner.
May I ask
That's
you one
very
question?
different.
I'm just going to approach Steve for 1 second.
Yeah, that's very different. It's right here.
Yeah, so I know exactly where your differences are. Steve is citing, so the significant tree list, the definition you pulled is from the definition section. It goes on, Steve's reading the actual provision in the code. So you're both right. Everybody's right.
Yeah.
Right, and
But it's
both
very
provisions.
different.
Contradict what he's reading in any way.
Nope, everyone's right.
I want to make sure the intention of my edits here are, it was literally just pulled from the definition, so thank you for
You're
clarifying.
welcome. And both both what you said and what Steve just quoted are deleted in this draft.
Okay, right. And so what we're suggesting, I didn't even go to the other piece that Steve's talking about. I don't really have an issue with the words that he's just read. We just wanted to make sure that the significant tree concept comes back to life. And also, in addition, definitionally in that paragraph, you can see the current definition, and you can see in bold, I added the words critical wildlife habitat. So in response to Supervisor Greenstein, the intention is not to eliminate all development, but look, if there's a tree that you know every year has owls nesting in it, or you know is used by a rare bird that needs that, specific type of tree, and there aren't a lot of those, I mean, it's part of the conversation and it's part of the considerations. And look, there are some developments that are made with kind of saying, we're going to keep this tree up for whatever the reason is. There are some communities that have, like a 400-year-old oak tree, and they really think it has value to the town. So that's something I wouldn't suggest extending the intention of that so that it becomes a deterrent to putting the language in. If you want to modify that language to something that you feel more comfortable with, so that the intention behind the edit can remain and not feel like it's overarching and overbroad. But I do think that habitat trees, if we walked over to a tree right now, it's a living entity and it plays a role in our community. And if there is a tree that actually has some, we use the word, someone suggested critical, it wasn't even my language, critical wildlife habitat, sounded good. So maybe there's another language, another wording.
No trees could come down if a bird lives on a tree, like a bird is on the tree, you
I-
can't take the tree down.
Actually, that was not what I said. So please don't mischaracterize what I'm saying.
She's saying a
This is
rare
not
bird.
meant to be, a hostile conversation. I'm just making a point and a consideration. So
Something though should
It's
be
very broad.
in seeker, right? I mean, that's something.
Well,
that's
I'm not sure that the
I'm
tree
looking-
ordinance is the
looking
best
forward to it.
place for this kind of, listing it, because it's really covered under, subdivision and planning board,
Right.
review on projects. They look at, a much broader picture of environmental, impacts and analysis. And, I mean, the intent to me was always that it was a voluntary, where this came from is Westchester County maintains a significant tree list for the county, and it's all volunteer basis. A good example is the Bedford oak, which everybody, has heard about. That's on their list. It's, trees of that nature, but it's all voluntary, and it's just a registry to recognize really old specimen trees. And that was the intent when they, drafted this language back then, was to, try to do the same thing in Newcastle, that it would be voluntary. The homeowner would, participate in it. It never got off the ground, and, that's why I didn't think it made sense to keep it in the ordinance, because it's really not an enforcement issue or not something that's really subject to a permit or anything. So I didn't feel that it really fit, within the, current ordinance.
Right, it would totally, just continue, please.
Right, I think it's not until you tell people that you're removing something they never even heard of and that they like the concept that it goes onto the radar. So I would encourage you, with all due respect to Steve, I totally hear what he's saying. I do think it's been kind of insular and people haven't really voluntarily thought about which trees they think. I don't know if we've ever put in the e-newsletter, is anyone aware of a significant tree based on this definition that you'd like to add to the list? So I would hate to lose something without even trying to use it. I think it's premature and a lost opportunity, and I think people would be very concerned about seeing it deleted. Next point, contact information. So I saw this in one of the town codes that I looked at in another town that actually explicitly puts contact information into the ordinance and asks residents to contact the town authority before they take down a tree to figure out whether it's under the auspices of the ordinance. And so we put in here to contact Steve Coleman as the environmental coordinator who has that
Yeah,
authority.
just an aside on that, every time you change a law, it means that you need to do a public hearing. So if we reshuffled the buildings department, it would mean that in order to change the contact information in our law, we would have to then hold a public hearing.
What does it say now?
I don't know what it says.
I
but-
don't, I
well,
didn't think it said anything about contact info.
Well,
That's why we were just adding.
But it
Right.
could say the town of Newcastle's environmental coordinator could say all that without giving the email address and the phone number.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
That's the intention
That-
of this
that-
comment.
Right, but by putting the contact person in, if we shuffle, somebody goes on leave, we have
Or a phone
temporary-
number changes.
Something like that, it's
Yeah.
very onerous.
Sure,
for-
maybe it's the ad, maybe we put the title and the address or something like that, because that will be consistent, that will be, right?
Just put a title in people's.
Yeah, the title's good.
Okay, that's fine. It's just the intention that people know who to reach out to,
And plus,
so,
you got his email address wrong, but that could easily be fixed.
okay, yes. I'm so sorry you're looking for errors as opposed to looking for the benefits of the comments. A lot of people put a lot of time into this. But yes, I apologize personally, Steve.
The way email
for the
systems
att- for
work,
the-
you need to have it exact.
Well, right, but this is a guide
Well, we're gonna
for-
take it
for
out.
comments
We'll-
and
I like the concept of the person, but the title, but not
Point
the
out, is
email.
that the wrong
Absolutely.
Email address in there, is that rude of me? I'm sorry.
Come on,
Yeah,
enough.
maybe,
Enough.
maybe
Enough.
it's not as,
Sorry,
it's missing the
don't
point,
add
but with all due respect, I'm so sorry I left an E out of Steve's email address. I apologize for that. But yes, this way we can just delete the other piece, just the contact Newcastle Environmental Coordinator. And then there were yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, not to point
No, go
out
for it.
errors, but we do have that language in 121.3.
It is?
Yep, hasn't been taken out. It's
Okay.
still there.
Okay, good.
We just added the second part clarifying what trees we're talking about, so I don't know if that was the clarification, if that was the change you were looking for, because
I just wanted to highlight it in a place that people could easily find it or it wasn't embedded. So as long as you think it's in a place where folks can easily find it.
yeah, that exact language still exists. We just
Okay.
added any removal of a tree with a DBH of 4 inches or more.
Okay, right, so this
add
is
a
really saying, like, if you're considering taking trees down in your yard, you may want to reach out and check about what you need to be thinking about in terms of the parameters.
So your change is you don't like that added language.
Right, in other words, I guess the feeling is if it's really a tree preservation ordinance, then we want people to be thinking that we're a town that really cares about preserving the trees. And especially since we're updating this more recently than a lot of the other towns near us, it feels like with everything happening, with all the loss of trees that we've had through, natural reasons and storms, and people prophylactically taking down trees because they're concerned, and Con Ed coming in, why not kind of have people think, hey, I want to take down this tree, but what do I need to be thinking about before it comes down? Do I need to get a permit or do I not need to get a permit? So it's kind of that proactive feeling of reach out to the environmental coordinator to see what you need to be thinking about.
But I think the recommended change makes it clearer, because we're telling them that they need to, any remove of a tree with a DBH of 4 inches or more. That's pretty clear.
Well, you'll,
Yours just says any removal of a tree.
right, well,
Tree is defined as 4 inches in diameter.
I hear you, although if you look down at our comments, we want to expand what a tree is, not necessarily by the DBH. So,
That-
I hear what you're
That's not
saying.
even recommended as a change in the code. This is,
I understand that, but again, this is a compilation of mostly people who have had personal experiences with trees being taken down, so you're hearing kind of their thoughts about how to prevent other people from losing trees near their homes that maybe can save the loss of a lot of trees. So just building on that, and we can come back to Steve's point soon. The permit application process, there were 2 pieces of language removed that we were hoping could be restored. One was within the regulated landscape buffer, any removal of a tree, which people actually like that language, and restore the language, any removal of a tree on the town's significant tree list, obviously because we were hoping to bring back the significant tree list. This next piece is really just saying, why not make it so that, every time someone wants to take down a tree that's healthy, there is more consideration. And the rationale for that edit, a single large tree down, this is almost to Jeremy's point as I was hearing your thoughts earlier, a few minutes ago, Jeremy. A single large tree, this is actually a direct quote from someone, a single large tree down can affect all adjoining neighbors. Reducing the number from 3 trees to 1 tree may also help to deter residents from taking down all their trees one at a time over a period of time. So if you are on a smallish property or there's not a lot of buffer and someone has beautiful big tree and it's just one, it totally changes their landscape, potentially their property value, the whole experience of their property. So it is we put a tree there just to kind of accentuate maybe, why three? It's kind of to the points you're mentioning. Why three? Why not an assessment of the individual tree? One tree in certain instances may be a no-brainer. And of course, it has no impact, but it may. So that was that thought.
But
And
you
then-
want one tree, but then you want to remove the requirement of the size of the tree. So
Well,
one
yes.
tiny little
Any
tree.
tree, any
In other
tree.
words, it's a subjective, decision, right? I mean, you could have a tree that's a conifer tree, right? That's an evergreen fir tree that has a really small DBH, but it's broad. And if you take, you could have, it might have like an 8-foot-long wingspan, so to speak.
Right.
And if that comes down, even though it doesn't meet the DBH requirement, will have a huge visual impact. That
Right,
kind of
no, I get that, that's a valid point, but you're also bringing in, like, my little hydrangea tree that
Right,
has
I
no
hear you, I
impact
hear
at
you. I know,
all.
believe me, it was really interesting trying to write these edits because it's tricky, right? I mean, you don't want to overstate things, but you don't want to miss an opportunity to prevent some trees that really maybe you'd rethink taking down.
When we did a lot of research on definitions of trees, I mean, the 4-inch diameter is taken right from the International Society of Arboriculture. I mean, it's a standard, method, and they feel that a 4-inch tree is what is sustainable. Anything less than that is still developing, and, so we took a lot of the information from standard, nomenclature that's, been accepted in the industry for decades.
I'm gonna jump in and say just very quickly, again, we don't have to beat it up now, but I think it's something we should just discuss a little bit further about certain trees and certain distances of certain size, even if it's one. But we can discuss that at a non-10 o'clock at night.
I
time
just
and
wanted to put on the radar that
Yep.
people are concerned about it, so.
You know what people are also concerned about is property rights.
Of
That if
course, I'm
somebody-
also concerned about property rights,
not-
sir. We all are concerned.
I'm not-
Let's take that as a given.
I'm not suggesting you're not. That wasn't my suggestion at all. What I'm saying, Victoria, is that part of the discussion needs to be property rights. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about Jeremy. I'm not talking about me. I'm not talking about Lisa. I'm talking about part of the discussion needs to be property rights.
Yes, and it's an interesting question because let's say I have a neighbor. I'm fortunate I have a big acre. We have a lovely barrier around us. But there are a lot of folks who have maybe a smaller property and the tree, let's say I make a decision about my property to take a tree down and it's my property. But we are in an interesting setting, right? The person on the other side of that tree, it actually affects their property value too. Because if someone comes to see their house when it's being sold, and a lot of the mature trees have been cut down, or there's a gaping hole between, the outskirts of their landscaping. I mean, so it's an interesting property question. It affects the property of the person who's taking down the tree, as well as the property of the people on the adjoining plots. So it's an interesting.
It's interesting, property rights.
So it's complicated, it's an interesting.
Definitely complicated.
Okay, so then additional considerations. These are more just narrative thoughts to consider as you move forward. Again, reinforcing the overall intention of the tree preservation law. There really is a sense of thinking of this holistically, the big picture, that, people are taking down trees. Ideally, there would be a sense of, someone with each tree really looking at the overall impact on that property and the properties around it. Residents should be permitted to take down healthy trees residents should not be permitted to take down healthy trees one by one, permit by permit, until there's nothing left. So it's almost like using the permit at, what's the right verbiage? Playing the law. In other words, I know, if I want to take down 20 trees, I just have to use this equation.
Gaming
I'll
the
take one,
system.
gaming the system, right, exactly, thank you. So just, thinking of it that way. And the approval process, someone suggested that they would love to see when it's being determined whether or not a tree should come down, that the environmental coordinator would come out to the property and see it from the other person's perspective. So they may come and say, oh, here's, this group of trees. It might not look so terrible visually, and all of the considerations in that space might be fine. But if you go to the other side and see how it looks, that there might be some value to doing that. And my sense is for at least some, That hasn't been the case in the past. So to encourage that kind of on-site visit. Educational component, there was, and this obviously may not, I don't know if it's going to be written into the law, but to be thinking about after these revisions are finalized, to creating some kind of a user guide. I think it's either the town of Ossining or the city of Ossining that has this really colorful, almost like cartoony guidebook for residents, that it's not this texty legal document, but this kind of quick and easy, number 1, number 2, number 3, to make it really accessible. So maybe think of something like that. And the value of planting native trees, we really haven't talked about native trees in here, but that's really the wave right now, environmentally speaking, of planting native trees. And keeping up snags, which are dead trees, which actually have value to the environment, and cavities for nesting birds, et cetera. And the notification of aggrieved party also came up in conversations. So this kind of lays out what the current process is. And the person and people were kind of saying it's important that the environmental coordinator, as the approving authority, communicate in a timely manner that a tree permit has been approved. When the planning board or zoning board is the approving authority, the application for a tree removal permit is subject to a public hearing. That's not the case here. And so to Jeremy's point earlier, it's an interesting question, right? You don't want to have like a gazillion public hearings on everything, but at the very least to really accentuate to folks that they can appeal if they don't believe in the decision that was made. And then once that kind of happens, and you see the process here, I won't read it out loud, but it talks about, once it's approved and this whole technical notification piece, but there's no notification of those aggrieved parties that a tree permit has ultimately been approved after the appeal happens. So the appeal happens, but if I'm waiting to see whether those trees are going to come down, it could be that the trucks come and take down the trees and I never even knew that it was approved. So to kind of formalize in writing what the process is to notify whoever the aggrieved party who challenged it was, because it creates an undue burden on that person to kind of constantly call on the town, and it's also a pain for the town to have to keep answering all those phone calls. And it's a balance, kind of to Steve's point earlier. We only have one environmental coordinator. We only have so many staff people, so you don't want to put anything in writing that's going to create a huge burden on them and overwhelm them. But again, maybe some kind of balance there, the interests of the residents with the interests of the town in that respect. And so the proposed process would be that the environmental coordinator approves the permit, notifies the neighbors within 100 feet of the property about the intent to file a permit, and the applicant will be required to notify the same neighbors of the approval and details of the permit. And again, by certified mail within 5 days. I guess that's the critical language here, within 5 days of the approval of the permit, so it's timely. And to make sure that it's spelled out, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Drew, Gamble.
Drew, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So maybe just to make sure that the appeals process is really clear and spelled out there. Almost to the end here, pruning. I mean, this issue of pruning is interesting because there's pruning and there's pruning, right? People have sometimes a professional arborist come in and prune, and sometimes they have like their lawn folks come in and prune, and they're taking off, various pieces of the tree. What starts as like a 25 feet, if that happens a couple of years in a row, it really can compromise the tree. And so the points here, the town should consider increasing fines. People are thinking about like what could be a deterrent for over pruning trees. Over pruning, as I said, like too much pruning can cause damage to the tree, which then justifies the resident taking the tree down. So again, it's almost in a way like a gaming on another level. And because it's damaged, they don't have to replant it, as opposed to if they wanted to take it down when it was healthier before the pruning. And as part of the rollout of the revised tree preservation law, the suggestion was that the town could notify or should notify local tree care companies of all the changes, and specifically that they cannot prune over the 25% of a tree. So that's a nice way to educate those folks doing work in our town. And then replanting, we do have obviously replanting pieces of this legislation. And there really was a sense that whatever we can do, whatever the town can do to really encourage residents when they're taking down screening, to strongly be encouraged to replant right there, because it's almost like the scale, right? If you take down a bunch of trees, you have to either pay the tree bank or put them somewhere else on your property. But again, to that consideration about how it looks to me on my property as an adjacent property owner, I would love to see that filled in, maybe with a little less, but to fill in that void. And so to really encourage, obviously we can't force, and that's not the intention, but however strong the language could be to encourage that, to replace where it was removed would be great. I think that's it. I just wrote, I put my email address here. I'm sure I could give you contact information for any number of these people if you wanted to contact them directly. But if you have questions, I can always also forward them to other folks. And here, again, I think a lot more folks would have signed on to this, and I'm glad that you're extending. Do we know the date that you're extending the public hearing until, perchance?
We will, when we do a resolution.
Okay, so if you could publicize that maybe, and let folks know, or let me know, and I can try to
Yeah, we
let these people know.
publicize. Of course, it's publicized.
Yeah.
Public
That
hearings
would
are
be
always
great.
publicized.
Where was this publicized? Just curious.
Well, it's
Because a
on
lot of
the-
folks didn't know when I reached out to them.
Folks have to go to the website and look at the agendas.
To the website, right, but
But it's published in the Journal News, isn't it?
so they would, right. But is it ever something you'd think about putting on the community discussions page?
Well, we don't know, no, that would,
Some way, because I hear you, like people, if they proactively go, but a lot of people
Face-to-face,
don't
not
know this is
Facebook.
being considered.
face-to-face.
Face-to-face is always, of course,
So
better,
much
but
better.
some way.
Thank you. Well, thank you for
Really
not
wish,
going through your whole letter, by the
you
way.
always make me go to this.
Thank you for
but I
not going-
am,
Thank you for not going through your whole letter, like you said.
sir, it's really hard to live in this town when you treat me like this.
Okay,
And it's becoming excessive.
okay.
I please ask you to be respectful.
That-
It's inappropriate.
I am.
Thank you all very
I am
much.
I am respectful. You just said
Thank you on
weren't-
behalf of all these
I
folks.
was-
Appreciate your
Victoria,
time.
Victoria, I was joking with you. You said you weren't going to go through your whole letter, but you did. I was
But
joking with
Robert
you. I'm sorry you can't-
Greenstein,
I'm sorry.
believe
I'm sorry
me,
it didn't come across as
if you've
joke.
ever studied law around hostile environment, it's about the impact you have on someone, not your intention.
Okay,
I am telling you the impact you're having on me.
I'm sorry.
Please be more respectful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
I just wanted to go back to the question about scheduling. It is really hard for people to wait for the agenda to be posted. And sometimes the agendas don't get posted till, let's say, the Thursday before the Tuesday, or, it takes time, I'm sure, to get everything together. But if it's possible for something where you're going to establish a new town code, to give more notice, maybe, I don't know, this week you did both your work session and public hearing. I don't know if you're doing that now every week or going back to flipping back and forth between 1 week, but if you could give enough time so that everybody could know that it's definitely happening 2 weeks from now or a month from now, because it's going to be a new town law.
Well, what we do is, like tonight, we're going to pass a resolution with the next date. And on every newsletter, I don't know if you get the newsletter, but every newsletter, at the bottom, it has the agendas. So anybody can click on the agendas and see,
As opposed to just going to the calendar and clicking on agenda, it's
the same
more
thing. It's just-
efficient.
It links, well, the newsletter gets pushed to you. In other words,
Right.
it comes into your inbox, and then you can just click on the link, and it takes you to the website. You don't actually have to firmly go to mikenewcastle.org and type in the
Yeah,
website.
but I do every day.
No, that's fine, I'm just
So-
saying, but it's, nowadays, some people appreciate having the information pushed to them as opposed to having to go.
Sure.
and
But
get
it's
it.
accessible both
So
ways.
it's accessible both ways.
I
The
understand.
point is that the information is pushed to people via the newsletter. You
Right.
do have to click on the link. And the fact is also, we also have it where we send out the agendas every week, and there's like 100 email addresses on that agenda, so you can sign up to receive the agenda every week.
I'm
that
just saying
gets
that the
emailed.
agenda, for people to be able within the week, so let's say you send out tomorrow next week's agenda, is still a little tight for whatever the topic would be that matters to whoever in the community. To get the babysitter, or say they can't work late, or whatever it is. So if it's gonna be a new town code, maybe giving a firm date, but in the future, gives more people the ability to.
Well, we do. I mean, like, for
To
example,
come.
tonight, it's going to be probably 2 weeks, because that's our next town board meeting.
Right,
So,
so-
when we do it tonight,
What'll that be, May
Right,
8th?
so just so that the board is aware, and I'm sure you all remember, this is actually the 5th time that we've had some sort of public discussion on this. So we started it in March, we actually started it in February because we had a rough draft of it before we did anything, and then we referred it to the ERB then came back. We then referred it to the planning board. It then came back. This is our second installment of the actual public hearing.
Yes.
We'll be scheduling it for a third public hearing, but this law has probably gotten more airtime and discussion than most of the ones that we've done, possibly other than chickens.
And, yeah, and we have received a lot of written comments, you know,
Right.
similar to what you sent, you know, today, with pictures and diagrams, and really,
Yeah.
you know, people put a lot of time into it.
Right.
So it is, I don't want you to think, and I know I said this, but I think it's worth repeating, the mere fact that people aren't here in attendance, you know, people can get up here and you could read and everything, go through it, but you could also submit stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what some people have chosen to do. So it's, and they're both, everything is looked at, and,
I know you guys
So
get
it's-
tired up here to be here this late, but I think also the FaceTime is helpful
no, I'm
to
not.
get through stuff.
I agree with you. My only point is that don't think the lack of people showing up this hearing, you know, reflects the people that are, you know, providing input.
Right.
Right. There are people that are sending written comments and spending a lot of time with their preparation. They're just choosing not to show up at the hearing.
You posted some of it for your discussion last week, but then you didn't get time to have your discussion in your work session.
Well, we didn't, did we have it in the work session last week? I don't remember.
Yeah, it got skipped over, and then just too much was going on.
Right. Well, if
Yeah,
nobody showed up.
but so,
also.
but I saw letters that were part of that work package.
yeah.
So, okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
So Victoria, it's May 8th.
Well, we're going to pass
Right.
a resolution. So you want to, we'll do the resolution now, then we'll go on to the next public hearing? We have 2 more public hearings to do.
All right.
So we need a motion to adjourn tonight's public hearing to May 8th.
Sounds like you just made that motion, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next public hearing we have is a local law to amend Chapter 63 of the Town Code concerning Energize New York Benefits Financing Program. So this is, we're opening up this public hearing for the first time. So I'll move to open up the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any public comments on this one? Joe, you want to give us a little summary?
I think Drew's going to give us a little summary on it. On the Energize? Do you want to do it? No, want me to? Whatever you want.
Yeah, so they updated the state law. So because of that, we are now updating our law to address the changes in the Energized New York Benefit
Night,
Finance
Steve.
Program. Happy birthday, Steve.
Happy birthday.
Oh, yeah, happy birthday.
Bye.
I know you wanted to be
Thanks
here
for
with
spending
us.
it with us.
You didn't know you-
What a great birthday. This one's going to go down.
The changes are pretty straightforward. There's really nothing, no changes to the substance, just little changes in the language to go along with how they changed the state law. Once we adopt the local law, we'll also adopt a revised agreement, which we've already put together, so it's ready to go once we adopt the local law. That's kind of.
Right, and the only other thing is that all municipalities that were part of this larger agreement have to have the same exact wording in each one of their statutes on the books. So they've been very meticulous about going through and actually double-checking and triple-checking that our version of the law is exactly the boilerplate that they have, you know, that mirrors the state law and that every other municipality that joined in the group approved.
And they,
So-
I'm sorry to interrupt you. They pretty much give you the template and say, you know, highlight in red, please add these changes to your local law. So we've done that. We've done that from other municipalities. They're also going to take a look at this to make sure that I did not make any errors and made sure that I put in the exact language they're looking for. But other than that, it's pretty, everyone's doing it.
Everyone's doing it. All right.
So, do you,
We have to keep this open and adjourn it? What are we doing with
I'll
it?
just leave it open for
Can we leave it
public-
open for
comments.
written?
yeah, why don't we leave it open, close it, but leave it open for written comments? Do you want to do that till,
Next 1 week.
yeah, so let's do it until
Friday
the 1st?
30th? Well, whatever the Friday is.
Okay, so
Okay.
we will close public hearing, leave
Move to
open
close
for
the public hearing
comments.
Regarding
Okay.
local law to amend chapter 63 of the town code concerning energized New York benefit financing program.
And leave it open for written comments until
May
noon
1st.
on May 1st, 2018.
Second. All in favor?
Threw me
Aye.
off here.
Okay, we have one more public hearing regarding a local law to create Chapter 100 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle to prohibit the sale of tobacco, liquid nicotine products, electronic cigarettes to a person under the age of 21. We are continuing this public hearing. There is nobody here. I don't think we need an explanation per se. We've had this on a
It's
number
pretty
of times.
self-explanatory.
Yeah, the subject line keeps, well, should we keep this one open for another week,
Yeah, we usually do that.
to the same day? Want to just do the same resolution?
Yep,
So
so,
we can close it and keep it open
Right.
solely for written comment.
May 1st, 12 PM, 2018.
second,
Made that motion, but we all did together.
yep, second.
All
And
in
the
favor?
board
Aye.
sees the changes and there's
Yep.
no problems
Yeah,
with
we
it?
see it.
Liquid, yeah, liquid protein, right, nicotine.
Okay, we did the third one already. That was our first one. And that is it. Let's go on to our resolutions.
All right, while Jill's taking 2 seconds, I need 2 seconds.
All right,
Okay.
so I authorize to set a public hearing regarding local law to amend chapter 116 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle concerning the real property tax exemption for senior citizens to be held at 7:30 PM, Tuesday, May 8th, 2018, in the Town of Newcastle Assembly Room located right here at 200 Avenue, Chappaqua, New York.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of seasonal students, interns in various town hall departments. Such interns will work part-time for no more than 10 weeks or full-time for no more than 6 weeks for the lump sum of $1,500 during the period of May 2018 through August of 18. They are as follows: James Scharf, Madeline Rackett, Jared Barlow, Talia Linder, and Tenshin Higashi.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
You're up, Lisa, go ahead.
I move to hire Brian Breen as temporary summer laborer in the Department of Public Works. The position would be for 37 and a half hours for a period of 10 weeks during the summer at an hourly rate of $13.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to hire Jacob O'Donovan as temporary summer laborer in the Department of Public Works. This position would be also for 37 and a half hours for a period of 10 weeks during the summer at an hourly rate of $13.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to hire Anthony Noto as a recreation attendant in the adult softball program at an hourly rate of $14 per hour, effective immediately.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the acceptance of New York State funding for state fiscal year 2018-19 for the CHIPS program in the amount of $223,424.19, paved New York program for $50,994.18, and extreme weather recovery, otherwise known as EWR, reimbursements for local governments in the amount of $42,557.95.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It was those last two amounts, by the way, which was the numbers that we weren't expecting.
That equated to roughly 100 grand.
Right.
I move to authorize the purchase of an unmarked 2018 Police Utility Interceptor Police Vehicle for the total amount of $31,823 in accordance with the Westchester County Purchasing Contract.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, this one, just with the Airport Advisory Committee, this last paragraph, I should have said something sooner, but do we need this last paragraph? Because we did that last week.
The point of the last paragraph is to show that that member would also be a member of this committee.
Okay, so
Got it.
He has to be.
We could,
They should be.
It does make sense,
They
but why
should
does
be.
it, but it doesn't really say that, though. The town would designate a town resident as a town resident appointed.
Then it's the second sentence, such
Such
individual shall also be.
Oh, so, right, so you're not really, it's more for the future use, right, got it,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, whereas the town of Newcastle Town Board has expressed interest in establishing an airport advisory committee, we believe that it's necessary to do so on behalf of the town of Newcastle. It is certainly beneficial to discuss the impacts of the Westchester County Airport and to provide related advisory reports and recommendations to the town board, and as well as the opposite direction to the county. Whereas the board will provide updates in reference to the airport committee. The town board hereby establishes an airport advisory committee, which will be comprised of no fewer than 5 members and no more than 7 members, all of whom are residents of the town of Newcastle. The term will be, at least 2 members shall be appointed for a term ended December 31st, 2019, and other members shall be appointed for a term ending December 31st, 2020. 2-year terms. Therefore, be it resolved that the town will designate a representative, as we've done already, appointed by the county legislature, who will also be required to serve on this advisory board committee. That sound good to you guys?
Yep.
Yep. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wasn't my best showing, but aye.
Good. I move to authorize the release of the bond for street opening permit number 2016-21 in the amount of $750 to 58A JVD Industries Limited, 261 West Lincoln Avenue, Mount Vernon. Work at the site was restored to the town's satisfaction.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take us home.
Okay, I move to authorize the release of the bond for street opening permit 2017-4 in the amount of $750 to 58A JVD Industries in Mount Vernon. Work at the site was restored to town satisfaction.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the request from the Horace Greeley High School Pediatric Cancer Foundation Club to use the Pocket Park on Sunday, May 12th for their annual bake sale.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $233,472.30 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detail voucher detail report, each prepared on April 24th, 2018. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, April 25th, 2018.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. You want to go, or am I doing this one too?
Listen, you do it.
I do it.
Still recovering from the last
Okay. So,
Get further resolved.
whereas the town has adopted a resolution requesting the state legislator to introduce legislation permitting the town of Newcastle to lease space on sports fields in Gedney Park, Millwood Park, and the recreation field. And we're doing that. So now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby respectfully requests the Newcastle State Legislature to adopt a home rule request authorizing the town of Newcastle to lease space on sports fields, fences at Gedney Park, Millwood Park, and the recreation field. Be it further resolved that the enabling legislation be in the form and content as shown in the attached Senate Bill S7731A and Assembly Bill A9821A. And be it further resolved that the town clerk is hereby authorized and directed to forward the appropriate number of copies of this resolution and the home rule request form with appropriate transmittal letters to each house in the New York State Legislature.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll end it. I got it.
Got this one?
I got it. I move to approve the Chapel Volunteer Ambulance Corps banner request for the dates of April 30th through May 25th. And in case you were wondering, that's 2018.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's it?
I move to adjourn until we meet again.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.